It has almost been a week since Shenhe has been released on the NA server, and I think she is a really interesting one. She's a lot better than what I initially thought, and I think overall Shenhe is a pretty balanced character. I don't think she is particularly broken, but I don't think she's bad at all. You pretty much just roll her because you want her or you want to play her, or you just skip if you don't care about it. But anyway, let's talk about where she belongs in the meta. As always, as the title of the video would imply, this video is focused on the meta perspective, and as always, if you're not subscribed, don't forget to subscribe. First thing first, Shenhe is a lot more like a sub DPS instead of a support who also happen to have supporting capability. I know this is a weird concept to wrap your head around, but once you are able to understand that concept, you realize that a lot of people are just looking at Shenhe wrong. For example, in this graph made by a Chinese video crafter, you can see that while Shenhe can buff ayaka a lot, when you properly factor in Shenhe cryo damage as her own personal damage, you can see that she actually contributes to about 30% of the overall team DPS, which is a pretty significant amount. She's much more like Rosaria or even sub DPS Ganyu in those cases. A lot of people might actually not be aware of this, but Ganyu Elemental Burst actually gives your entire party a 20% crowd damage bonus to every active party member who is standing in the AoE. So when we're talking about Ganyu as a sub DPS, we're talking about how she does a lot of good damage using her Elemental Burst, but also she also have a buffing capability identical to Shenhe, because Shenhe Elemental Burst also gives you crowd damage bonus to your party and stuff like that. Anyway, with that being said, with her being a sub DPS, you pretty much just roll her because you like her. You just like her design, or you like her gameplay, or you want her to DPS for you. Now, of course, you could still roll Shenhe if you want her to support your ayaka or your ganyu. We're gonna cover that later. For ganyu, it's not really worth it. For ayaka, it's okay. But if your sole purpose is to roll Shenhe as a support, I actually don't think that's a good roll. But again, on the other hand, if you are rolling Shenhe because you like Shenhe, I think that's okay. As a sub DPS, Shenhe require you to also bring out a crowd party member. Now, a lot of people look at this and think that Shenhe is really limiting, and that's actually not that big of a deal at all. It's pretty much just similar to how you have to bring other Geo character for Ito, or you have to bring Xiangling when you're playing Bennett. You're building around a certain character or building around your DPS / sub DPS is pretty typical. Again, people thought that Shenhe was a support and building around a support doesn't really make sense, but once you realize that Shenhe is more of a sub DPS, you just build around that sub DPS. And I think people are too over-focused on the fact that Shenhe only work with crowd characters, but it doesn't really matter again because you just build around Shenhe. The good thing about Shenhe in this case is that she doesn't care what kind of cryo party member you bring at all. Doesn't matter if it's Kaya, doesn't matter if it's Rosaria, doesn't matter if it's Chongyun, doesn't matter if it's Diano. You just need them to apply a good amount of cryo in a short period of time, which they all do except for Eula. But pretty much every single crowd character apply good enough cryo that it doesn't really matter who you bring. Again, except for Eula, which we'll talk about later. In fact, Shenhe doesn't care about what attack they have and what talent they have. All they have to do is apply cryo in a good amount of time, build critical damage, and build cryo damage, and then you're pretty much good to go. One such example is when you're building Diona with your Shenhe, what you could do is put a 4-set Blizzard Strayer on your Diona with HP main star on your Sands, because Shenhe does not care for attack at all. So you just build HP to boost your healing and shielding anyway, and then you just build cryo damage bonus and crit on your circlet. And then you also just use like a 3-star bow with a crit substat. In this case, the Sharpshooter Oath is a pretty good one. I don't have it leveled because I'm too poor, but that's something you could do. You can pretty much make any 4-star crowd character viable in a Shenhe party, which is a really good aspect about Shenhe, because if you're a Chongyun main before and you couldn't find like a viable purpose for Chongyun in the meta, well, now Shenhe can give your Chongyun a very good purpose, which is to proc Shenhe elemental skill. I mean, it's good enough, okay? Like, because you couldn't do this with other 5-star crowd character before, or any other characters. If you wanted to play Chongyun, if your objective is to put Chongyun into your party, well, rolling an ayaka doesn't help you. Rolling a ganyu doesn't help you. Rolling a Shenhe, however, is different. Rolling a Shenhe give your Chongyun or your Kaya or whatever a purpose. And this is what's really good about Shenhe, and what I really like about Shenhe. In general, what you want to do when you have Shenhe is to just draft a team around her, either a mono cryo team in the format of free cryo plus a hydro, or in the format of free cryo plus a anemo, and then you just play Shenhe with those teams because you again want to play Shenhe for, like, I don't know, boomer purposes or whatever suits you, and it will have pretty good performance. It's not the same as top of the line ayaka ganyu, top of the meta performance, but they have good performance. But aside from mono cryo team, there's also the reverse melt type team, which is not very well known to a lot of people. In case you didn't know, reverse melt team are ran with Xiangling, Bennett, Rosaria, and Kaya. It's a pretty meta team, just not a lot of people are aware of it. Ayaka. And now you just replace the Kaya with Shenhe, or maybe even replace the Rosaria with Chongyun as well. And then this gives you the Bennett Xiangling Rosaria Shenhe, or Bennett Xiangling Chongyun Rosaria, not Rosaria Shenhe, which is a really good team. This team have really good performance, and just a lot of people are not aware of it, which is one of the reasons why I'll be making a guide on it later. But of course, lots of people are probably wondering, okay, but what about if I want to put Shenhe together with my Ayaka or Ganyu as a support? Well, here's the thing. When we're talking about Ayaka or Ganyu, those two characters already have a super powerful team around them, which are namely freeze comp. And when you're trying to shove Shenhe in, you're trying to compete against those comp, and it's very hard to do so. I'll give you the quick version, but Shenhe doesn't really pair that well with Ganyu. She's okay, but the rotation really doesn't line up. Mostly because with the new Morgana variant, you want to use 15-second rotation instead of 20-second rotation, which upkeep the freeze much better. And Shenhe with her 20-second elemental burst cooldown, as well as 10-second elemental skill cooldown, just doesn't line up at all. It's not that you can't do it, but rolling for a Shenhe just to shove her into your Ganyu team is not really worth it. And the same go for Mel Ganyu, because in Mel Ganyu, you are competing against either Kazuya or Zhongli, in which case Kazuya gives you much better damage results and Zhongli gives you much better defensive results. So Shenhe doesn't really compete with either of them. You could run Bennett, Kazuya, Ganyu, and Shenhe, but that's more of a damage per screenshot team. You just use that team to take a picture and call it a day. It doesn't really work that well in Abyss environment where you're actually trying to clear, especially since that you are running like the top characters already. Then there's no reason to try to shove another one in just for the purpose of getting a little bit more damage. With Ayaka, however, Shenhe Ayaka pairing is actually not bad and it's pretty good, but the problem here is that Ayaka Ganyu pairing, especially in AoE content, is just better. So if you're just trying to roll for another 5-star cryo character to put into your Ayaka party, I would just recommend Ganyu over here. Shenhe is easier to play than Ganyu, and it's more fun loaded than Ganyu, which are a really good factor, as well as for single target environment, Shenhe is better than Ganyu for Ayaka team by like approximately 10%. But remember, Shenhe is a 5-star character. She has the same opportunity cost as any other 5-star characters. That means if you really care for single target performance for meta reason, you could just roll for Hu Tao instead, or you could just play any of the national variation. There's no reason why you have to shove your Ayaka into a single target damage environment unless you really want to. And of course, there's one last final character, which is Eula. Now, pairing Shenhe with Eula is actually fine. It's just for meta purposes, you don't see any performance increase. As in, using a Eula with a T6 Rosaria and using a Eula with a Shenhe have identical performance mathematically speaking. That means that there's no reason to roll for Shenhe at all here, because you could just get the exact same thing using a T6 Rosaria. But this also means that Shenhe is a valid substitution for Rosaria in a Eula team. So if all you care is, well, Shenhe have better booba than Rosaria, which so far this is the only real reason you roll for Shenhe over in this video, then you could replace Rosaria with Shenhe, and you could definitely do that. But there is one final thing that Shenhe does a lot better than Rosaria, and that is pay to win factor. You see, as Rosaria is a mere 4-star character, she doesn't get constellation beyond C6, and she doesn't get her own signature weapon, where Shenhe can acquire her own signature weapon that is tailor-made for her, and she can get constellation. To be honest, her constellation are not really that good. Her C6 is actually like pretty bad, except for meme team, because most of the time you just care for elemental skill and burst damage, but are still factors that you can factor in when you are a pay-to-win characters or players, where you're like, oh, I can get a signature weapon on my Shenhe, but I can't get a signature weapon for Rosaria. So Shenhe naturally just outscale Rosaria in the pay-to-win category. In fact, Shenhe is one of the characters that can dual-wield 5-star weapon. Not only she has her own signature weapon, because her elemental skill only scale off her attack, but it uses other character critical ratio as well as damage percent bonus. That means that if you have a misbidder on your Ayaka, maybe even an R5 misbidder on your Ayaka, Shenhe can actually utilize that misbidder and do even greater damage. Misbidder have a bunch of critical on it, and misbidder also have a bunch of damage percent on it. If you have a misbidder Ayaka, your Shenhe will actually benefit a lot from it, and that's something hard to imagine. Even further if you have constellation on Ayaka, because something like the defense strat C4 really strong, C6 Ayaka, and then you just double dip the Shenhe bonus or something like that, really strong. And of course, that doesn't factor in the fact that artifact contribute to as well. You have perfect artifact on your Shenhe if you're a pay to win player, and then you get perfect artifact on your Ayaka as a pay to win player, and then you can double dip the perfect artifact twice. Again, usually we don't really talk about pay to win factor on this channel, because most people I imagine are more toward the free to play spectrum or low spender here on my channel, as that's what I'm mainly focused on. But in case you are a pay-to-win player, then these are factors that you can consider, and they will make your Shenhe outscale other character. In the end, I think Shenhe is a rather balanced 5-star character. She does not need ayaka or ganyu in order to work. However, if you do have ayaka or ganyu, then she can also work with those two characters. Of course, a lot of people were initially concerned about how she only worked up with crowd characters, but honestly, that's not that big of a deal at all, especially because crowd characters are straight up significantly stronger than other characters because they have Blizzard Strayer set, and ganyu and ayaka are just league above other characters at the moment. So I think only working a crowd character is honestly not that big of a deal. The real thing here is that Shenhe is not really worth it as a upgrade over existing 4-star character like Rosaria, and if you care for a 5-star character as a upgrade, there's still ganyu as a sub DPS. I think that while Shenhe is a balanced character, keep in mind that pull value and power level is not always in a one-to-one relationship. And I think in this case, this is especially important because while Shenhe is a perfectly fine and balanced character, I think her pull value is a little bit lower than average simply because other options exist and they honestly just work well enough already. So in this case, I'm actually going to put Shenhe as a 2.5 pull value. Once again, does not mean she's weak. In fact, I think she's far from being weak. It's just that she's not worth pulling from a pure meta point of perspective because of other options already exist. Shenhe doesn't really enable any new team comp. Reverse melt has always been a thing. Mono crowd, you could play without Shenhe. You can just do like Ayaka, Diona, and Rosaria, or replacing the Rosaria of Ganyu also work. It's not a new concept. It just appeared to be a new concept because people only try it out with the release of Shenhe. However, if you do like Shenhe, don't let this video stop you. I think this is the most important call out because while I said Shenhe might not be worth it, she is still a really balanced or even strong crowd character. That means that if you do decide to pull her, you will be able to get a lot of value out of her still. You can put her into those really powerful crowd team and you will be able to have very good performance with her. It's just that she's not worth pulling simply because other also very good crowd character exists, not because she is weak. So if you like her, that's all that matters to you. And I think that's a really good thing. I know, like, she's still a really powerful character, so feel free to roll for her. That being said, as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.